Good morning, Jonas. Welcome to Leaders in Library Season 3. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much.
Superb. Lovely to have you finally on the show. We have been wanting to have this for a long time, and COVID and other reasons delayed it. But finally, there we are together.
Yes, absolutely. It's great to connect with you. Great to have this conversation. I'm really looking forward to it.
Lovely. Same here, because the book that you have chosen is a very interesting book. And the books written by the author, both of them are amazing books. And what you've chosen is something very interesting. And what's exciting is nobody has spoken on this book. So this time, the first time this book is going to be spoken on Leaders in Library. So I'm very, very excited to talk about this.
Great. I'm glad that this is a new book. There are thousands of books out there. And I'm sure during the course of your conversation, maybe season 50, season 100, we will cover.
Thank you. God bless you for saying that. I just hope I'm able to do that, because somebody said that passion is all about consistency and not intensity.
Absolutely.
So I just hope that I'm able to reach that day. And when we touch season 50, you and me are going to be connected. I'll call you back with some other book that time.
Oh, yeah.
You would have grown older. I would have grown older.
Karan Johar, Shah Rukh Khan. Doing their coffee with Karan.
I know. So how are things at work otherwise?
Work is doing very well. There is some semblance of coming back to normal. Although we are far away from it, but it's good to have that familiar feeling.
So travel is going to start for you again.
Yes.
Very, very well. Super. So let's get started. You are on LinkedIn. People know you. You keep posting a lot of stuff. You keep sharing a lot of stuff. But as the format warrants, let me introduce you formally to the audience. So good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whichever part of the world you are going to be when you're going to listen to Jonas, the guest of the day. It's lovely to have him today. Jonas Prasanna is somebody who builds people and culture in the digital world. He's very, very passionate about getting the best talent of the world into the organization that can really add value to the company that he works for, or whichever company he's worked for. That's the value proposition he brings onto the table. He's an avid and a book lover like me. That's why he agreed to be part of my show. So thank you, Jonas, for doing this. Truly humbled to have you amidst other guests from the world of business. He is currently the international HR business partner for Boeing, which means he manages all the HR related stuff as the representative for multiple regions across continents. That's a huge global role. Congratulations on that. He's also awarded as one of the top 20 HR influencers by HRM, identified as a very early potential talent by earlier organizations. So that's very visible, and you will see it in the conversation that we have with him. So Jonas, lovely to have you on the show. Welcome on board Leaders in Libraries Season 3.
Thank you, Rajiv. I'm very happy to be among the various esteemed guests that you have. If I look at the guests that you have had, I'm very honored to be part of this.
Absolutely. I think lovely set of leaders, and all of them are amazing book lovers. I can't be happier to have this kind of a myriad variety of guests from C-suite, from the world of coaching, from the world of organization development, authors. What else can I ask for? It's fantastic. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the book that you have chosen. And the book he has chosen today is Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. And I'm sure many of you who have read this book or have not read the book, you should go and pick it up. It's a fantastic book. Now, whether it is this one, or whether it is The Power of Moments, or whether it is Switch, or whether it is Upstream, these are other books written by these authors, and all of them are phenomenal books that you should pick up and read. If not all, Switch is a most read book by these two authors, and the brothers have done a fantastic book in this particular book as well. So let's talk about this. Before we get started, my first question to you, Jonas, tell me how books happened to you, and how was the association over your journey of personal life and professional life?
So books, my earliest memory of books and having a lot of books was collecting books from school.
Mm-hmm.
So that used to be an event. You would go with your parents, you would go and they would dump this huge set of books. And, that whole smell of books, that's what intrigues me. So as soon as you get to open a new book, that memory kind of comes. and then packing those books, putting those brown plastic
Covers.
wraps around the
The
covers. Around the
labels.
books. Yes, and the labels. That was my first introduction to the books. I would, as soon as we get the books, we'd go and see all the pictures in the books, just to see if everything is good and nice. And that, that's my first introduction to a large set of books. One of my neighbors, a pretty elderly woman in her 60s and 70s, she used to be an avid Kannada book lover, and she used to subscribe to the local library. And she used to take me along, just to come along with her to the library. And although I won't read too much of Kannada books, I do know a few authors, but I would spend my section in the kids section. So the Hardy Boys, Nancy Drews of the world was my go-to books. And we'd spend hours together, read in the newspapers. And I used to do one thing that towards the end of the day, I used to have the librarian clean the place, as in ensure that the newspapers are all folded up and tidied up. So that is something, so books brings back that memory, whether it's an old book or a new book. That has been something that is integral. It's been part of my life.
Fantastic. So how old were you when you were visiting the library along with the lady?
I would say around the 6th, 7th standard was when I kind of got active.
12, 13 years. 12 years, 13 years.
Correct. Yeah. And also my dad, his way of imparting certain life lessons was through books. So he used to give me books. One of the first books that he has intentionally gifted me, other than comics, was 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens.
Wow.
So that's the teen version of the very famous book, which had a lot of graphics and which had these very interesting callouts. So it made it more easily digestible for me. And then he used to have a big library in terms of books and other things. So sometimes I used to also sneak in and take some of the the other books that he used to have and read.
Lovely, lovely. When you spoke about the lady, what I was visualizing, how books connect across ages, right? A 12-year-old boy and a 60, 70-year-old lady. Look at the age gap. She has seen life. She has read more than what you would have probably read that time. But both of you are holding hands and walking into a library, which is just so lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. I am forever grateful to her for just getting me introduced. It was like, why am I coming here? And then I'm like, I should be coming here all the time. It just transitioned from that.
Lovely, lovely. Tell us a little bit about how did books help you in your career, in your leadership growth?
For me, I think books are a mirror, a reflection of some of your thoughts. It also helps to crystallize some of the words or the feelings that you are going through. So it puts words to those feelings. And that's how I've used books in terms of how I approach things. It's not like when I have a problem, I read a book, but it's there at the back of my mind. It's processing. But then you read a passage and then something strikes you from that passage. You're able to verbalize, what you're going through. For example, in this COVID times, this whole thought in my mind was, how do I go out there and help someone? Will I get COVID? Those kind of things. And I learned that there's a phrase to that. It's called learned helplessness. And that is a real condition, that you're forcing yourself to be helpless when you can do so much more. And that came through reading a book and really understanding what that feeling was phrased. And when I was able to give a name to that, I was able to do something about it.
Absolutely. I think you're very right. And these authors have this amazing knack of joining words and creating a bullseye phrase that just hits you hard, right? I could never coin these, but when I read them, wow, how did this guy or this lady do that? And that's why they're authors, right?
Yes, that's right. A lot of deep thought goes into framing those words.
Beautiful. Let's talk about this book. Very interesting book. I love his writing. I love the way both of them put across things very straightforward. They don't just go around beating and making it soft and mushy, right? Let's talk about the first one. This was very, very interesting. When till I read the book, I never thought it from these two words, the tappers and the listeners. I've done a lot of stuff around these in workshops and leadership intervention, but these two words were beautiful. Tell me how young leaders should understand this concept of tappers and listeners in their own growth of leadership.
So maybe I'll go into the example that the author
Mm,
had shared, the experiment that was done by the Stanford professor. So the Stanford professor divided her class into two groups, the tappers and the listeners. So the tappers needed to think of a tune. It could be as simple as Happy Birthday to You, or a very famous song that people would instantly recognize.
mm,
They cannot hum it, they can
mm,
only tap it.
mm,
The listeners are supposed to guess
mm,
what is the song that is being tapped.
mm,
So when they did that experiment, after doing the experiment, they were asked to give the answers, and the listeners were asked to predict how much have they got right.
mm,
And so they were in the 50% percentile.
mm.
The tappers were asked to give their rating in terms of how many would have guessed that tune. They went high, they went to about 70%, because it's a very popular tune in their
Right.
mind. They are tapping. What they found out was only 3 out of 125 people who went through this got the actual tune.
Mm,
So the book talks about a very interesting concept. And again, this concept of crystallizing what we already know.
right.
It calls it the curse of knowledge.
Mm,
Tappers have the curse of knowledge.
okay.
So they know the tune. They expect others also to have the context or the background of the tune to be able to guess it correctly.
Right, right.
But the listener has no context, does not have that knowledge. So as a result of which is unable to grasp what the person is trying to say.
True.
And this we see reflected in the workplace innumerable number of times.
Mm-hmm.
The CEO has a plan based on information that he or she has. It could be finance insights, it could be sales, it could be marketing, it could be future positioning, etc. The frontline worker, the sales guy on the ground, may not have that information. So when the CEO crafts a strategy, he expects it to be understood by everyone in the
Right.
But the frontline person doesn't have the context. So he's wondering, why is this person doing this? And that is the curse of knowledge.
Beautiful.
So we need to be aware of that and be able to articulate what we want to say. And this whole book centers around how to articulate the message, how to make it stick in the mind of people.
Beautiful.
So
I think, yeah. I mean, leave the CEO for a moment. Even managers who manage teams think that, why are my team members not getting what I'm trying to say? It's so commonsensical, it's so simple, it's straightforward. He or she forgets that if he or she is able to think at the speed of 5x, they can't expect the team members to do that, because if they could, then they would have been the boss, right?
Absolutely.
It'll take time, it'll take experience for people to think at the pace in which a senior professional does. So you need to give those juniors that time and space and context for them to understand. Yeah, very, very, very true. Very true. I love the word curse of knowledge. When it comes to CEOs, others, I think I would also want to add, when I read the book, curse of knowledge and curse of experience as well, if I can put it.
That's true.
We have that also, right? We have done it, we have seen it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we see that, like, you are, when you transition into a new organization, okay, you leave a job, you go into a new job. You drop that curse of knowledge, because you go in with the mindset that this is all new to me. I have to learn. I have to begin from the bottom. But if you find tenured people in your organization, this is how we've always done things. That's the standard. When you are trying to drive in some change, why? Everything is working well. The curse of knowledge.
Very true, very true, very true. Beautiful, beautiful. So he talks about multiple principles in the book, right? So I thought I'll pick up four of them, which were interesting to me, right? And I like the acronym called Success That Leads. has created. We'll talk about that later. So let's pick up the first S of the success, principle number 1, which is simple. We have to read this. How do you understand the concept of finding the core that he talks about? And how have you used it in your work, Jonas? Help us and help the young leaders listening.
So I'll give you a very live example. All of us are required to do presentations. Okay? At least in my profession, our bread and butter is excels in presentations.
Oh yeah.
Right? So what is the purpose of a presentation? The purpose of a presentation is to convey vast amounts of data in a manner that people can either inform, / educate, or help people take a decision on a particular topic. Now, if you look at the vast majority of how presentations are done, they are loaded with information. Because the person expects that the receiver knows all the work that has been gone into the presentation. Okay. That is also something that, and being very real about it, you need to show that you've done the work. And interestingly, towards the 20th or 25th slide is your ask. What do I need from you? Okay. By the time you reach that, it's already 1 hour. And the person is so exhausted with information that your information gets lost in this whole thing. So what the book suggests and says is to don't bury the lead. Okay? Your lead, so in journalism, the lead is what the crux of your story is.
Okay.
And to really get the readers interested to read the rest of the passage, your lead needs to be really encompassing without giving all the information.
Right.
So the way that we can use this information in our work is to essentially put the lead out there. What is it what we are trying to say? And these are the supporting things related to that main point.
Okay, okay.
To help either inform people or take a decision. So that's one. The second one is also in terms of really looking at how to make it simple. Is that idea easily digestible for people? You don't want to lose it in a lot of verbiage or acronyms, etc. So those are two important principles, two important aspects in that thing that really comes to the fore. And I find this so relevant in the workplace. We tend to always bury it, whether it's writing emails. We write really long emails, but then the ask is lost somewhere in the email.
Very true. Very, very true. When you spoke about email, I remember I had a very powerful learning some time back. Earlier, I would write the subject and write a small sentence there. I learned it in one stage of my career that on the subject, let's say you're submitting something to Jonas from my side, from my desk, it goes to you as a submission. Then in the subject line, you just write submission, colon, and then write a small phrase of what it is. If it is for approval, write approval, colon. If it is for you to read, or if it is for sanction, say sanction, or discussion. So it's so beautiful that the first prefix word exactly tells the reader, so this is for submission, this is not for approval. So let me read. That was a very simple but a very insightful learning I had. So when I read this simple, that came back to me.
Correct. You're so right, because we are flooded with emails that we would just like to have an easy access to what are the things that we need to action on, to be aware of, and maybe also to delegate to whoever needs to take that action.
Very true. Beautiful. Let's go to the next one. This was very interesting, and I had not thought of this at all, obviously, till I read this book. The second principle is it's called unexpected, which is very interesting. It's all about curiosity, right? So what is this gap theory of curiosity that Dan is talking about? And then why is this an important element towards that stickiness factor that he talks about? Malcolm Gladwell also talks about stickiness in triggers. He also talks about stickiness, and he gives credit to Malcolm in the book. So how is this gap theory helping stickiness for us as presenters, as influencers in business?
Yeah. So the gap theory is very interesting, and he talks about an example that it talks about the Saturn rings. Okay, Saturn is the only planet that has rings, visible rings around.
Yeah.
So this is a scientific journal, and many different scientists, are working on explaining why it is. Why is these rings there? So the gap theory comes in when you show that there is a gap in knowledge. So you have scientists from different universities, MIT, Sloan, Oxford, every other like top universities, all having different theories of why Saturn has a ring.
Okay.
Now you are causing a gap or an open question. Why are they getting it all wrong, or why are they getting different views? So that triggers a non-scientist to actually go and ask the question why. So the gap theory centers around that. That is to be able to open gaps so that you can fill in with the knowledge. So unless you say that there is a gap there and then fill them with knowledge or fill them with information to fulfill that gap, nobody will really care, with that particular thing. So that is one important element. There is a sub-component to it in terms of hooks. So he describes memory, and memory is in different types. So you have abstract memory, you have memories triggered with emotions, feelings, etc. You have memory triggered because of incidences in childhood, etc. And he gives a very interesting example of a Velcro. A Velcro on one side has hooks, and the other side has loops. So the way the Velcro closes is when the hook goes into the loop. So the way in which you can trigger memories and make that instant connection. And I gave you this example in terms of the smell of books. Start of what we are saying. So that is a deep childhood memory that I have, and that which is caused by multiple hooks and loops. Multiple interactions that I've had. So when you give me a book, or you present me with some information, say your favorite food, if it's something that was prepared by your favorite, your mother, your favorite aunt or uncle or whoever, you're instantly transported back to that place.
Yeah.
So so if you are able to, and he talks about various different concepts in the book, but give that feeling to the reader and engage that person at a feeling level, through memories, your story will stick.
Right.
So if you are running a campaign around certain types of food, etc., you bring those visuals that can trigger those memories. So that is that's how you kind of bring that whole thing.
Beautifully articulated. I think it's a very interesting concept for leaders. It's very interesting to know this concept, right? Because end of the day, the purpose of a leader talking about something is to influence action.
Yeah.
And if the curiosity is not getting triggered in the mind, and the gap is not filled with enough information, and they're not able to go back and get that stickiness feeling, they would just shun it off as information, may not move to getting impressed, or definitely not get inspired to do something, right? And then there are many leaders who do this beautifully in town hall. There are few leaders who don't do it so well in a town hall. I think when I was reading, that was coming back, that how are few leaders able to get this gap in the minds as we listen to them, and they're able to pour that knowledge in. Now I had a wow in my head when we listened to this guy.
And it's beyond just balance sheets. Like for example, you're looking at only sales, but if your product has an ability to impact people's lives in whatever way, whether it is directly or indirectly, and you are able to connect people at an emotional level to that. So say for example, let's take food delivery apps.
Right.
Now, I as a food delivery app see an interesting opportunity to help people who are suffering from COVID because they are unable to prepare food or get their nutrients. So if I rally my people to that cause and say that, you know what, we will go out there and help the community by providing food to these people. Your people will be so much more energized because one, they relate to there is somebody back at home who has suffered from COVID. And I'm not just doing it for them, I'm doing it for somebody else because I can relate to that. So that is, you know, some of the messaging that I could use as a leader, you know, to really rally my people around an idea.
Absolutely. I think very nicely said. It's outside the boundaries of data and Excel sheet. It's about the story that you can pull out of the hat, right? Lovely. I'm going to go to the next one. And concrete is the next principle that he talks about. What is this concrete all about? So let me ask it from a business angle. How should leaders use this to sell business ideas? Could you tell me from that perspective? You travel across the world, you do a lot of work at HRBP. Your prime job is to influence the business to do certain things that you want them to do. Hence, your HRBP today has become a very significant role in organizations. From that angle, tell us why concrete is an important principle and how do you use it?
Yeah. So the way I would look at concrete is, I'll give you an example of what we are seeing on the workplace. So there is two sets of people. You have the people who work on machines and you have the engineers. Now, something breaks down in the machine. Okay. The engineer, the people, the mechanical folks, etc., or the skilled workers, I'll call them skilled workers. The skilled workers will look towards the engineers to say, what has happened? Why is this machine broken? Or we can see something is wrong. Maybe this is the right way to do it. The instant reaction for the engineers is to let me go to my drawings and see what has happened.
Right.
Because my whole basis is I need to look at the drawings. Now, as an engineer, I'm working in an abstract level. I'm looking at a 2D plane and then figuring out what could have gone wrong. The expectation from a skilled worker is, come and see the machine with me and tell me what's wrong.
Correct.
Right? Come down to the floor, tell me what's wrong. But then the engineer tries to dumb down that information to the skilled worker, thinking they don't understand. So I make even more complicated diagrams.
Okay.
Which further complicates the situation.
Okay.
Right? And you see that in the workplace. You have different people working in different types of abstraction levels. And the need of it to be concrete in terms of what you want to convey and how we will go about getting it done. So I'll give you one of the examples that was cited in the book, although I'm talking about my company is featured in the book. So when Boeing 727, which was one of the earlier single narrow body aircrafts. So we used to have very large aircrafts. And now 727 was the first generation of narrow body aircrafts. Now the 727, the mission state, the concrete example that executives gave to the design and engineering teams was that this 727 needs to have a capacity of 131 passengers.
Okay.
It should fly from Miami to New York City and land at LaGuardia Airport in the strip, which is 4-22, which is a fairly small strip. It's not a very large strip. So that aircraft needs to land, turn, and then take off in that narrow strip.
Okay.
So you couldn't do it with a wide body aircraft.
Right.
You have to do it with a narrow body aircraft, but that narrow body aircraft should also have large number of people that it can take. That is a concrete example of what a leader wants, addressing a market need, and basis that broad level constraints, the engineers and the skilled workers can go about designing the aircraft.
Right. So why do leaders miss this concreteness? End of the day, isn't it about concretely telling what you want?
Yeah, very good question. Sometimes we get lost in the specifics. That is, you say that I want a certain profit margin. Okay. I want to achieve 20% profit margins. Now, 20% again is the curse of knowledge, because I, as a leader, know that these are the various factors, moving factors, whether it's my inventory, whether it is my costs, whether it is my overheads, etc. And I think 20% will help me get an X shareholder value.
Right.
Somebody on the ground doesn't know that. They only see 20%. Now, if you are able to, make it a little more concrete without dumbing down it, saying that we see gaps in certain areas and we invite people to see how we can solve for those gaps. I was just listening to a podcast, very recent, where there was this storage company, and the storage company used to be consistently getting a certain amount of profit till the COVID lockdown situation happened. And with lockdown situation, companies were not storing many of their products; they were just leaving it at home. So they had a dip in sales. But the leadership decided that they will not let go of people, but they would look at alternative means. So they said that we will not let go of people; we will furlough people, so that you just take a pay cut, but you still remain employed with the company. People, on the other hand, came up with their own ideas of how to reduce cost. This was not a directive from the CEO of the organization. The CEO laid the facts out, saying that this is what is happening in our company. We need help. And in order for us to help, if you can take a pay cut for a small duration of time, we will stay afloat. The unintended trigger was that people know that there is companies under stress. What can I do?
Beautiful.
That is a great example.
Well, that's a fantastic one. I mean, if you have the link of the podcast, send it to me, Jonas, on WhatsApp. I would love to listen to that. It's very, very interesting story. Let me understand that. Beautiful. Let me go to the next one, which I think you spoke earlier also when you spoke about emotionally touching something. And that's a principle that he again talks about. What is emotion when it comes to creating stickiness? We are talking business. We are talking numbers. We are talking growth. We're not here to talk something mushy. We know that context. Yet, why emotion becomes an important principle by Dan in this book?
I think emotion and empathy are superpowers, which is not used by organizations. They say leave your feelings don't bring your feelings to the workplace. You have to be professional. You have to act a certain way. But human beings are surrounded by emotions. We are emotional beings. So I really love this one quote from the book. It says that empathy emerges from the particular rather than the pattern. We're so trained to see patterns. That if I get X amount is the profit that I need to get, I need to do X, Y, Z things, and that's the pattern. But the particular gets missed out in this whole thing. So that kind of really stuck with me. Empathy is on the particular rather than the pattern. And the book actually gives a very interesting example. So IDEO is a premier design thinking firm. And they run a lot of experiments with various different types of organizations to look at empathy, which is the core of design thinking. Now, IDEO, what they did was, this was for an emergency wing in a hospital. And they were asked to bring some kind of efficiency to that process. Now, everybody in the emergency wing is compassionate, empathetic to the patients, etc. But there's a whole myriad of things. So what they did was they filmed a video from the perspective of a patient. You are dragged into an emergency room. You see bright lights. You see people speaking. It's muffled tones. Suddenly somebody pokes their head in front of your face, looks at you, goes out. Again, you are put into a gunny. You're dragged across the room, placed in one side of the bed. Somebody comes and checks up on you. Imagine if you are a person who don't speak the language. You're a visitor to that country. How are you going to get your point across? And you're seeing all of this. You're in a state of panic. You're in a state of emotion. And this video was shown to the nurses and doctors in the ER. And a sudden realization happened, oh my God, this is how the patient sees us.
A lot of chaos happening when he's already going through the pain.
Yes, yes. And especially in an emergency unit, there is beeping sounds, you have the ECG machines there. There's complete chaos. You don't know. And typically when you're dragged into an emergency, you don't know what has happened before.
I know.
Most of the time.
True. So, I remember that hospital scenes shot in the Indian movies. That this families waiting outside, not knowing what's happening to the husband or the father. When you have a nurse running from this side, then a doctor says, "Ye leke aao," and then there's so much frantic happening to show that they're actually making all the effort to save the soul, and this family has got no clue what's happening.
Exactly. So that was an interesting thing, and that's where emotions kind of thing. And the book talks about different ways in which emotions can appeal. One, to the self-interest of the individual. Emotions can appeal to the community, but at the core of it, you make it about an individual rather than everybody. Like if you see, and no offense to NGOs, but if you see NGOs, they've perfected the art of making it about their individual. So if you see any of these videos, they talk about the individual. There is a Maya, there is a Lakshmi, there is whoever. And can you give food to Lakshmi? Can you educate Lakshmi?
Yeah.
They don't say about these are the number of people that are there. You need to educate all of them. They talk about that individual.
Yeah, that comes back.
So
that's it's about the particular person, not the pattern that you said.
Exactly.
That's a very powerful. I mean, I agree to that. That sentence of particular and pattern hit me very, very hard, because when I talk about growing business through people as a leadership essential, I keep telling people that you can't spray the same paint on all the employees of your team, right? Because it's particular. Jonas gets motivated by X, Rajiv gets motivated by Y. It's very particular. It's not one pattern. I think it just sits beautifully there also when managers lead business and leaders drive organization.
Correct. Yeah, one size doesn't fit all.
It doesn't. Very true. Lovely. Fantastic conversation, Jonas. I just love this. I'm going to close this with the last question to you. You're a young leader. You've traveled, you've seen business, you're with one of the greatest brands that people aspire to work for. What are two key inputs that you would like to give as advice to young leaders who are aspiring to grow in their career?
The first thing I would say is normal people in normal situations can make a profound difference with sticky ideas. That is something that I can really say. And the book kind of lays it out for you. Right. This is the pattern. This is the formula. Just ensure whatever you're communicating, whether it is to leaders, whether it is to whoever, those items are checked. The simple, credible, emotional, and stories element in this entire thing. Those are checked, and you will ensure if you follow that, your stories will get definitely stickier. And so that was something that I really liked about this particular book. And last but not least, I think stories really and stories books enable people to act. So, if you can get the opportunity after reading the book to talk about the book, to share it with somebody.
Yeah, beautiful.
That will, one, it will reinforce that Velcro thing in your head.
Very true.
And it will give that sense of curiosity to the other person to say, why don't I pick it up and read it?
Very true. Thank you. As you said, it just struck me that the purpose of this conversation, this going on LinkedIn, for many people to do the job of that Velcro between you and me. Both of us are creating the book, and look for many people to pick up the book and read and get the benefit, isn't it? So beautifully said. It just picked me suddenly.
Yeah. Well said, Rajiv. That's the whole purpose of why we are having this conversation.
Absolutely. And thank you for being part of the Velcro, whether you're part of the hook or part of the loop. Thanks for doing that. It was an absolute pleasure. It was a breezy conversation. Thank you, Jonas, for taking time and doing this for us. Completely appreciate it.
My pleasure.
You have a lovely day ahead. Bye-bye.
Bye.